Evolution by natural selection. Species change over time. Individuals do not evolve. You're born with the traits you're born with, and either you're lucky enough to survive or you're unlucky and you don't survive. But species, if there's a lot of different variation, and there's some are more likely to survive than others, then those that are best able to will survive, and those with the lousy genes and traits will die off. And only the useful genes will be kept in the population. And in that way, you can have changes within a species over time. So some key things that Darwin said had to exist. There have to be individuals with useful traits and less useful traits. There have to be dark moths and light moths. There have to be tall giraffes and short giraffes. If everybody's the same, you won't get evolution. So there has to be variation. Variation is critical. If everybody's identical, then either all their traits get passed on, or nobody's traits get passed on. So he said, now some traits are particularly useful. And if there are particularly useful traits, we will call those adaptations. That's a lousy word. I wish he had never picked it, because lots of students want to say that organisms adapt. But that makes it sound like giraffes stretched their necks. They did not. Either giraffes were born with short necks or long necks. And if they had long necks, they could reach the leaves. They survived. They had babies. If they had short necks, they died. You don't get to grow a long neck just because you want one. So the word adaptation simply means having a useful trait at birth for life. He also said that there have to be some winners and losers. If there's enough for everybody to survive, if the short-necked giraffes and the long-necked giraffes all survive, then everybody passes on their traits. So if there's leaves everywhere and everybody gets to eat, there will be no evolution. There have to be more born than actually survive to have babies. He called that overproduction. And he said, as long as you've got some losers and some winners, and you've got some that have a useful trait, there's variation. Those with the useful trait are going to survive better, have more babies, and the frequency of their traits are going to increase in the population. And the ones with lousy traits are going to decrease in frequency in the population. And that is called natural selection. Now, the only thing that Darwin could not explain was why there were giraffes with short necks and long necks to begin with. In other words, he couldn't explain where variation comes from. We know now, with all of the science that we've learned since then, that there are two places where variations occur. One, DNA just changes. Like, it just has mistakes. Those are called mutations. Mutations are usually lousy. They usually add lousy traits, and individuals with mutations generally die. But every once in a while, one is useful. One turns out to be useful, or at least not harmful. And so there's a few individuals with it. And then suddenly, if the environment changes, that trait becomes exceptionally useful. Those individuals survive better, pass on their traits, and the frequency of their traits, that mutation suddenly increases. The other source of variation is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction combines genes in new ways and adds variation. So asexual reproduction keeps everybody the same. So the species that are more likely to evolve, that is more likely to survive changes in the environment, are those that sexually reproduce and those that have high rates of mutation. And that's evolution.